Did you know that dance breaks are good for your heart? That swimming can help you sleep better? Even roller skating can help keep you healthy. Learn how to make physical activity fun for you and your family. Visit cdc.gov/moving matters.
Right now, get up to a $15 gift card after rebate when you purchase select Superstart batteries exclusively at O'Reilly Auto Parts.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
Gargi, let me start this program with a question to you very directly.
What do you mean?
At 1 minute and 48 seconds past the hour of 3 o'clock Central Standard Time, bumper to bumper, name of the show. When do good things happen for a basketball offense?
When do good things happen? Well, the great Rick Majerus would say, offense is spacing, spacing is offense. And what I think he meant by that is the ball needs to move, the ball needs to be shared, you need to have good spacing, and then good things happen.
I think Mr. Majerus reminded us from time to time as well that good things happen when you take the ball to the basket.
Oh, that's a good one.
Now, that can be preceded by the sort of ball movement that you're talking about. But when you take the ball to the basket, even in a three-point dominated league, some remarkable things can happen. I'm looking at the play-by-play from yesterday's beyond improbable 131-128 Timberwolves overtime victory over the Oklahoma City Thunder. And I have in front of me the fourth quarter of the ball game, okay? When it obviously looked like it was over until it, frankly, was not over. For example, 5:10 to go in the game. This is when Anthony Edwards is still in. He makes the first of two free throws, then the second of two free throws. Let's just go with the Wolves scoring from that point forward. Terrence Shannon makes a two-point shot off of a Nickeil Alexander-Walker assist. Terrence Shannon makes a free throw. Terrence Shannon makes a second free throw. Nickeil Alexander-Walker makes a free throw. Nickeil Alexander-Walker makes the second of two free throws. Now, every once in a while, a clutch three doesn't hurt. Naz Reid hit one from 26 feet with 2:17 to go. At that point, the lead is down to single digits, 9 points, 121-112 in favor of Okie City, still, you think, in position, obviously, to win the game. But let's move ahead. Naz Reid, driving layup. Rob Dillingham, driving layup. Jaden McDaniels, free throw, 1 of 2. Jaden McDaniels, free throw, 2 of 2. Jaden McDaniel, 2-foot, 2-point shot on a Rob Dillingham assist with 11.2 seconds to go, and he makes a free throw as well to complete the 3-point play. And that's how it ends in regulation. We have now tied them 121-121. We outscore them 10-7 in the OT. May I submit to you that if Anthony Edwards continues to play in that game, the Wolves do not win it?
Well, in there's a step-back three that did not get made, and then correct. I think Shea went down and went right to the rim.
And a turnover before then he got pulled with was it a calf injury?
Yes.
Whatever it is. Now, again, he obviously had a key block and a good defensive stand. You know, he became a trooper, said, I'll come back in there and I'll help and I'll do the dirty work and I won't even worry about scoring. Look, I'm not going to pretend that what took place last night is a blueprint for the Wolves' future because it's too improbable that it happened at all. You have to have some of your main pieces clearly involved. There was a number of factors that came together, but it did dovetail nicely with what we talked about early in yesterday's program, which was too often down the stretch of games in which the Wolves are trying to come from behind. And this is another problem, by the way. We're behind way too much. That, to me, is the part of the story we didn't spend enough time on yesterday. But the fact of the matter is the offense looked very different because it was in attack mode. It was not in retreat and just jack up jump shots mode. And that was the large reason why the comeback was even possible to take place. I think we didn't miss a free throw in the fourth again, by the way. Our free throw accuracy the last few games has been ridiculous. Can that continue? I don't know. But all of that's what fascinated me looking at this, the number of just going to the basket, getting fouled, making something happen on the way there, taking Parrish to thought a 2-point shot or even a mid-range shot as well. And the kids, it's almost like the kids don't even know any better. You know, they're in that mode right now.
They're just out there playing.
They're just out there, like I said, fearlessly going at, especially Terrence Shannon, who he seems at times just irrepressible. Now, he got caught on at least one charge. That's going to happen because of the bull in the China shop approach. But there's something appealing, I think, and refreshing about, I'm just going until they stop me, right? I'm just going. And I don't think I can be stopped on a given occasion. And all of that added to or contributed to a very improbable finish. And as I said, the regular Wolves offense with, dare I say it, more regulars who are out. And that game is a distant memory. I don't even think we win it. Do you?
I don't.
They just went about it completely. And maybe every play was called. I don't know. I doubt it, though.
No.
I think individual players and maybe even team, working together, moving the ball a little bit, there was more of we're going downhill. We're going after this thing. We got nothing to lose. This is what we're going to do. We're either going to score under the basket, we're going to get a layup, or we're going to get fouled, or if we're lucky, both. And we'll take our chances about how it might come out.
And a lot of that started from what was happening on the other end of the floor, where Oklahoma City started missing shots more than they had the last couple of nights. They did a good job getting it out of Alexander's hands.
They did.
And then,
you know what they did? They blitzed them.
They blitzed him up top.
You love the cliche.
What I did like is once he got rid of the ball, his cousin, Nikhil Alexander-Walker, just stayed with him. He just said,
he did.
You get away from it. We're going to make these other four guys figure something out. And they didn't do it enough, but also the rebounding was better. I know there were a few offensive rebounds that they gave up, but they didn't pay for it. And they were physical on the glass. They were physical defensively. And that, I thought, brought the energy up. And a lot of those were quasi-transition plays as well, certainly with Shannon, where you get the stop, you get a good rebound. I'm sure Oklahoma City just kind of fell asleep because they're looking like this is the white flag.
Yeah.
You've got all these kids out here. And that's why it was fun, because the energy was just contagious the entire time once those guys really started rolling, and it translated to both sides of the floor.
4:22 to go. The Wolves are down 12. Anthony Edwards misses the proverbial 27-foot three-point step-back jump shot. And then about, looks like 30 seconds later, Anthony Edwards loses the ball in a turnover. A Dort steal. At that point, the Thunder have the ball in a 14-point lead. They probably hit, Jalen Williams no, he did hit that shot. That actually, they increased it to 16 points after that.
Right.
121-105. And I think it was about then, was it not, that Finchie pulled Edwards, if I'm not mistaken. But that's the irony of this thing. Is the last two memorable plays in regulation by Edwards were a long shot missed, which is what happens down the stretch. That's what we're always seemingly left with. He's just going to jack it up. And then a turnover, which often is part of it as well. I meant to get a soundbite from you. We can maybe even do it tomorrow. It was almost like he was reading my mind, and it was the SiriusXM morning show with Frank and Scal. And Scal was playing off a quote from Edwards about being double teamed, blitzing. We decided to give them a dose of their own medicine. The way they blitzed me, we blitzed Gilgeous-Alexander. And there was something else in the quote about doubling and getting the ball back and whatever. And it was brilliant from Scal. And Scal said, you know what? He needs to talk. Anthony Edwards needs to have a talk with two people. One of them is Steph Curry. The other, who is the Celtics' best player?
Jason Tatum.
He said, because he said Tatum especially had to learn over a period of time that if you get the ball too quick, get it back too quickly on the double team where, all right, we're going to take it out of your hands, but you're going to get it right back, that it's the worst thing that can be done for you as a player, that you can't be impatient about getting the ball back, that you have to be a little bit more deliberate in that approach, and that's part of what Anthony Edwards has to learn. And that, too, was precisely what we were talking about on yesterday's program. I gave up. I'll admit it. Not only did I fall asleep on this game, and this was an early game, okay, and then I woke up, but I never bought, because when I fell asleep, it was, 15 points probably, but it was enough to say, they're not going to come back. And I didn't bother for once in my life to check X all that much the rest of the night. So I literally did not know the team came back until like 6 a.m.
Yeah.
I'm reading out of StarTribune.com. Yeah. And I'm looking at the headline, but what?
Right.
Are you kidding me? Is that even possible?
Yeah.
But
we had similar experiences because I learned about it this morning. But the distinction would be I didn't fall asleep. I went to bed.
Yeah, you just said I've had enough.
I made the conscious decision to turn it off. It wasn't like I was watching it and dozed off like we do on late night Twins games, and then Jimmy Haney, the golf show, comes on, and that's why I woke up. I made a straight up decision to turn the TV off, put my head on the pillow, probably throw in a podcast, and go to bed. I straight up just went to bed. I think they were down 20 in the third at that point because it's schedule loss, as we know. Back to back, you're probably not going to win it. They're making every shot. I felt perfectly comfortable going to bed and saying, I don't feel like I'm going to miss anything.
No,
thankfully,
reasonable.
Before all of that, like 2 hours later, my wife had said, do you want me to record the Wolves game? Because we had to go put the kids to bed. So I was able to watch it this morning and later on. So we got it all figured out.
It also is, I think, true that the Okie City played with almost no big men in the fourth quarter because who's the guy from the Knicks? Hartenstein?
Yeah.
I think he got his nose broke on the back of Jaden McDaniel's head. And then I don't think he came back. And obviously, our local big man who plays for them,
Chet,
it was a back-to-back, and they sit him. They're cautious with him to this point.
Right.
So, again, that also, I'm sure, contributed. The fact that Hartenstein wasn't there, I'm sure, contributed, made it easier for the Wolves kids to get in there. But don't apologize for it. Get in there if you have the opportunity to do it, which this team did again and again and again down the stretch of that ball game. And they flat out, if they keep playing Anthony Edwards, they don't win it. They don't. I don't think because they're so conditioned to play a certain way with him, and that got abandoned. That they didn't have to worry. The kids didn't have to worry about that because Edwards was at that point not in the ball game. We're going to switch dramatically when we come back. I'll set up the rest of the guest lineup for today. But football conversation when we come back. It is, after all, Combine Week, and our guy Peter Bercich will file a live report after our two chief brain wizards spoke earlier today. Of course, the head coach and the general manager of your Minnesota Vikings. Peter Bercich is next.
I've had great dialogue with Sam, from the time the season ended up until very, very recently. And I think my relationship with Sam has grown to a point where, the respect level is sky high. And this process is going to play out both short-term and long-term for the Minnesota Vikings. And Sam is in a position where the NFL thinks he can play quarterback at a high level. So that's a really good thing, and I feel very proud to be a part of helping him get to this point, and we'll see kind of where it goes from here.
Audio always sounds better when it originates in Indianapolis, Indiana. That, of course, is where the Combine has begun. Peter Bercich is there. He joins us via the Connecticut Water Systems hotline. How many years, have you counted up now the number of years you've been coming to the Combine?
Yeah, I got to go here when I was coming out of college, and then I didn't make my return until last year. So it has not been an every year event for me until recently.
I didn't realize that. So, I thought you usually went along with PA. Good. Yeah. Okay. Good. So what in your current role, what do you try to get out of it?
Information, what teams are thinking, how teams see certain things, and it's also a good chance to catch up with people that you only see maybe a handful of times a year. guys you played with or against, or guys you coached with or against. I mean, so in that regard, it's always a lot of fun, and you get to you meet new people along the way, and so it's a bit of a convention on that end, which is amazing how much it's changed and how much the NFL has just embraced the media side of it. So, but listening to the coaches talk and catching them, this is a different time of year. There's not a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
They're going to keep their jobs for one more season. Those decisions are pretty much made by now. So, a little bit less stress on most of these guys.
So how much do you have to guard against misinformation and or subterfuge? Because, the part of me that always feels like, well, these guys, they want to really protect and hold close to the vest their best information, or their best analysis about a given player. Or is that stuff widely shared about so-and-so looking like, God, this guy looks like he's going to be a first-round draft choice, whatever? How do you go about figuring out what's real and what is, sort of part of the game that some of these general managers and personnel people play?
Yeah, you hear certain things, and then you just ask the question, and then listen for their response. And in a lot of ways, it's like how they do it. And you do this, I'm sure, and you know exactly what I'm talking about here. When you sit down with these players and get a chance to interview them, most of the difficult questions and things are all scripted.
Yeah, right.
So it's not necessarily what they say; it's kind of how they say it. Right? Are they robotic? Are they, do you feel like you get to know this person, or do you connect with this person? And then, for us, we can ask the question and then just kind of listen. You don't expect to get an answer, right?
Yeah, right.
You just kind of listen and watch to see, can I read between the lines? And then, at that end of it, it's not, we're not breaking news here. We're not here to get a scoop. We're not here to get rumors. We're just here to kind of get a feel for what's going on. And that's kind of the best way, I think, at doing it, is just go with your gut.
Yeah.
And throw some things out there and see if people bite, or if they don't want to touch it. Right? So that's every bit of that tells you at least some type of information.
It's the age-old debate that has gone on forever, and I think continues to go on to a degree. As this event has gotten bigger, I think there's been the possibility that teams can, and even fans who now, I don't have to tell you, they're on every moment of this thing now. It's become that big. They tend to then potentially run into the trap of making it only about the workout, or making it only about what the measurables might be. So how do you get the best out of what this event has to offer in terms of any GM, in terms of evaluating, without losing sight of the fact that there ain't no games being played here and there's no scrimmages taking place here?
Right. I think one of the best ways is when you show up here is to have a plan. And, as specific of a plan as possible, meaning, we like this player A and player B, and even, just have a plan for everyone that you're going to sit down with. We like everything about this guy, but we have some questions over here. So we're going to, we're going to try to address those, and not just show up and kind of wing it, or just wait for someone to stand out and impress you. I think you have to have a plan really going into this, and have reasonable expectations about what you hope to ascertain from all of these guys. Because again, they're all, they're all so well coached. And as far as the physical abilities, I mean, it's important. Unfortunately, that's kind of how the first round kind of falls out. Height, weight, speed means a lot, and that's kind of a deal where it's a kind of a CYA, right? The ability to run fast and jump high means you should be, if you're very athletic, you should be a good football player. So you're not. It's definitely not the scout's fault. It's the coach's fault. I got to be able to coach these guys up, right?
Right.
I mean, that goes back, but they see athletic ability as potential, right?
Sure.
And part of that problem is like, well, he's had this speed his whole entire career, and if there's still some question marks, or he hasn't shown this type of speed on film, then maybe he just doesn't run and, go 100% on film. And that's again, Dan, kind of what you're doing here is things that don't fit, things that stick out, right? Some guy that was a good player, not great, but good player, and then he comes down here and lights it up physically, and then you got to ask yourself, what's going on with that? Why doesn't he look like he runs a 4.3 40 on film, right? And that's kind of the process.
We started the segment with a soundbite from the head coach, Kevin O'Connell, earlier today, clearly asked about Sam Darnold. To a certain extent, I guess it remains the key. The Darnold domino remains the key to explain a lot of other moves that this team might or might not make this offseason. Now, the sense I've gotten from several of the media jackals who cover this team every day is that they believe more than ever that it's very likely that the Darnold ship has sailed, that they will be not necessarily stunned, but definitely surprised if he ends up back here, that the handwriting's on the wall, there's enough demand out there, enough teams that need quarterbacks that he's going to get a contract that's going to make it very difficult, no matter what the Vikings would like to do, to keep him here. What does your gut tell you about where Darnold ends up?
Well, I think the more I talk to people, and had a few of those discussions today, because you take a look at, for example, The Athletic, and they come out with their list of free agents, and Darnold, I think, is number 8. And then you speak to a couple people that been around and thought, and they say that Darnold is the number 1 free agent this offseason.
Interesting,
because he's a quarterback, right?
Yep.
If Darnold is the number 1 free agent, if that's truly how these teams and how, because it only takes one, but how they're looking at him, he's, goodbye. He's a goner. I mean, but then on the other side, you could say, well, if he is, then maybe you could find it, slap a franchise tag on him and trade him away and maybe get something for him. So, it's a little bit all over. It's a little bit all over the board, but the one thing that is across the board is they were surprised at how well he played. And then the next question is kind of what happened toward the end of the season, and you go into that discussion. But no, there's no doubt that he might be looked at a higher level than even we expected. We expected him to be important free agent, and he's going to get an opportunity to play somewhere else and start. No question about that. But man, I mean, to be the number 1 free agent going into 2025, that's a pretty remarkable jump in value, and from what you thought maybe coming into this.
Peter Bercich, Dateline, Indianapolis, Indiana. I don't think have spoken either on or off air since the season ended as abruptly, or the postseason ended as abruptly as it did. And you mentioned that, there's always going to be interest in, okay, well, he was great until he wasn't. What happened the last couple of weeks? How do you look back now that we have, the emotions are a little clearer, we're a little further away, we're past the adrenaline stage. What do you think happened to him, specifically this offense more generally, those last couple games?
Yeah, and this again is my opinion and my opinion alone. It doesn't. Number one, it doesn't take much to go from, looking. It's not a quantum leap, right? It's to go from being a great quarterback and then not looking so hot. It doesn't. It's not. I just want folks to understand that you don't just go from great to terrible in a week, right? And that margin of error is pretty tight. But I look back and in the beginning of the offseason, and he was sacked, I believe, 57 times throughout this season. I think it was somewhere in there.
Yep.
Somewhere in the mid-50s. And looking at the sack numbers, obviously the Bears led the league in that, which, go Bears. But you have to, at some point, that's going to take its toll. At some point, in my opinion, that is going to start to affect the way you either follow through or go through your progressions or your footwork. And I really think that toward the end of the season, he just didn't look to me as as sharp, if you will, maybe they did at the beginning of the season. And I think that being hit that many times really, my opinion, took a little bit of a toll on them, or enough of a toll on them, that the Lions lined up and pressed it and said, hey, we are either going to hit you and bring you to the ground, or you're going to put up 48 points against us. And they laid it on the line and were successful in what they did.
I think that's fair to say. Do you view, if indeed Darnold is gone, the assumption is that this team would like to bring Daniel Jones back in the Darnold role? Maybe not starting. Maybe JJ is starting, even from the beginning of the season, or maybe you let it play out in the training camp. But do you expect that Jones is going to be in this mix in 2025?
I would absolutely think so. I mean, you had him around for a few weeks toward the end of the season, and even just that little bit of time is very informative, I think, for the coaches. Number two, the other part is there may not be another. He may have a better opportunity somewhere else. I think the Vikings put their best foot forward with him to show him what this franchise is like and how they go about their business, to get him to want to stay here. And then they have to be honest with him and say, it'll be a competition, just like it was going into the season last year with JJ and Darnold. If it's going to truly be a competition, and not just saying, hey, we need you, until the young guy's ready, or, if you're honest and he's willing to take that risk, you'd love to have him. I mean, from a height, weight, speed, talk about height, weight, and speed and combine numbers and all, Daniel Jones is unbelievably impressive.
That's
he
true.
He is a big man and has, unbelievable arm strength, the whole, all the tools. So he's like Darnold 2.0. And I think if you put anybody like that in this situation, that Coach O'Connell is going to get the best out of him.
If you had to go to Vegas today to lay a bet on who will start the 2025 regular season for the Vikings, Danny Dimes or the kid, JJ, who are you putting the money on?
Oh, that's a tough question. I would have to think JJ right now. I think with what they did to bring him in, he's the future of the franchise. They need to get him. They need to get him out there. And so I think that JJ McCarthy's had a good year. Right, you have a year to learn and see how things go, learn the language of an offense. So I think I do think he'll win that spot and be our day one starter.
What is Peter Bercich looking for the Vikings to try to get out of this draft? We know that this team is not blessed with a bunch of picks right now, at least. But as you pay attention to the combine, as you focus on whatever positions you think are important, what's to the top of the list on your request sheet when it comes to the Vikings 2025 draft?
I guess you got to look at it as wants and needs, right? And right now, the needs are going to be 2 running backs. Even if you bring Aaron Jones back, you need 2 running backs. Yeah. Aaron Jones just came off, I think, his most productive year, most touches and everything else. I don't think you can count on that again 2 years in a row with him being a year older, the whole thing. So I think you need 2 viable running back options, and then you have to really figure out what you're going to do in the defensive back room. You might lose 1 or 2 of your safeties. You've got at least 2 or 3 free agent corners. Yep. Mekhi Blackman coming back. But that's one guy. You need a bunch more than that. So those are the 2 positions I think that have the greatest amount of need to them. Now the depth at defensive tackle, we're being told, is real. Depth, I heard someone saying today there might be 30 running backs drafted this year. It's like, okay, well, there might be some value later on. Yeah. But with there may be the ability to get a good playmaker at some point. And I think the main thing with us and our advantage with that is just with our scheme in Flores, it'd be nice to have a great pass rushing interior defensive lineman, but I think having a great run stuffer or a guy who can eat up some gaps up front and free guys like Blake Cashman so they don't have to take the pounding on base downs would be a huge asset as well. So, but yeah, I think running back and defensive back are the big ones right now.
I look at, the way the Super Bowl played out, the way the playoffs played out, and I guess sometimes there's a tendency to overreact to whatever team wins that year, that, okay, you got to learn the lessons from that team because it does change year to year, and not all teams are built the same either. But part of what does strike me, certainly about the Eagles and even really about Kansas City to a degree, in an era where their offense is not as explosive as it once was, is that there's a certain, at the line of scrimmage, especially with the Eagles, offensive line, defensive line, a certain emphasis on that aspect of, product development and drafting and so forth, and even physicality about the way you go about your business that does feel kind of throwback, it has a throwback quality to it. And I do wonder sometimes whether this organization gets that or whether this team emphasizes it to the same degree. I'm not, that's not always the pretty plays, as you know. It's just the solid play or the play up front that allows you to make whatever play you want to make with your, with your skilled people. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you saw what a lot of people saw, and that was just the physicality with which the Eagles went about beating the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs didn't, it's not like they out-schemed them or tricked them. It's almost quite the opposite. They just said, okay, we're going to line up like this. You're going to run a counter. Our defensive end is going to take your guard and put them in the next county. And even though you guys have it all penciled in and all blocked up real pretty on paper, if you can't, if we're just going to blow things up and none of it's going to work. You put consistent pressure on a quarterback. I mean, Mahomes throwing 24 or 27 yards in the first half. I mean, whoever would have expected that out of him? That decision to be that physical wasn't made Saturday night before the Super Bowl.
Great point.
Right? They didn't get together and have a team huddle on Saturday night and say, "Hey, we're going to be fit." No, that's 2 weeks of preparation, if not more, to say, yeah, we're gonna beat these guys in the trenches. And I think for the Eagles, obviously, number one, it's kind of their identity being in Philadelphia. But offensively, I think throughout the year, they took more and more, I think, off of Jalen Hurts' plate.
Yeah.
And depended more and more on that offensive line and on Saquon Barkley, that it just evolved that way. And then they got to the Super Bowl. It got them to the Super Bowl. And then when they got there, they just kind of finished it off that way. Right. They had that momentum through the playoffs saying, hey, we run the football. We're a physical team up front. Jalen Hurts, you're going to give us move the chains on us a little bit and, a couple good, accurate, deep throws because we got receivers that are going to get open, especially if they're packing the box to stop the run. And then defensively, same kind of thing. They just had the right mix of physical guys up front. But again, that type of play style didn't happen the night before the Super Bowl. Those guys were building up on that all throughout the playoffs, and you definitely saw it. It was glaring. I mean, it was the most glaring one-sided Super Bowl we've all seen in a long time. And I think that's the one thing that you can walk away from that and say, my goodness, I mean, Philadelphia just absolutely, in this day and age of the athletes and the rule changes and everything, it's a wide open game. It's an athletic game. Yeah, it's still a physical game. So, in that regard, I think Philly executed it brilliantly.
Do the Vikings need more of that?
Yeah, every team needs more of that. I really do. I mean, there's only so much you can do on a blackboard. There's only so much you can do. I think you need. There's a balance there between the old Joe Gibbs days when you would practice in pads on Friday and Saturday because coaches said, well, when we don't play in pads, we'll practice without pads, to this day and age where guys have to be 100%, and it's a longer season. So there's kind of a balance there that you have to maintain. And that's a tough rope to walk. But at some point, you have to understand the scheme is only going to get you so far, right? And you have to still be able to do certain things at certain times, and it's going to matter. And the footwork and the fundamentals that are very, very tough to maintain if you're not practicing or playing live, those can whittle away, and I know that as a player. With Denny, we didn't practice with pads on a ton. And so we were always, on guard for those kinds of things. So I think every team can use that.
Last item for you today, Pete Bercich joining us from Indianapolis. You mentioned, obviously, you went as a player. Now, it was not quite as crazed then as it has become, obviously. But what do you remember about it? Is it intimidating? Is it overwhelming? Is it weird? Or what are the best Pete Bercich memories?
Yeah, it's definitely weird. I mean, you get off the plane, you fly down, and you get shuffled over to the facility. I don't even know what you want to call it here. This whole city that they have. Anyway, and then you get physicals all night. The next day, you may have some meetings, and the next day you have a couple things. You bench press, and then you run and you're gone. Mm-hmm. I mean, these guys are here for 4 or 5 days now. Right, so they're here for a very, very, for a much longer period of time. A lot more interviews. They talk to the media. I mean, it's a much more open process. When we were here, it was all top secret, hush hush, secret squirrel. I mean, you back in the day, you ran a 40. They wouldn't tell you what you ran.
Really?
They wouldn't give you your numbers. No, it was all secret. We had to know somebody that you can get the results for what you did. So they were much more guarded back in the day, no question about it, than it is now. Now it's a lot more public information.
Yeah, it seems like you should have the right to your own, 40-yard dash. I mean, you ran it, but whatever.
I had the right not to run it or participate. So
that's
if I had
true.
a problem with the way the draft went, I could have just not gone.
Yeah, that's
the problem.
Did you set a record then for a 40?
No,
okay,
not by any means.
So.
I was kind of hoping that they wouldn't tell anybody else when I ran. Let's just keep it between
we don't want to know.
You and me.
Whatever,
I have no. But again, that's the weird part, because I know that I talked to a handful of teams, but they all had different numbers, right? So there wasn't there was no one that said this is your 40 time. Everybody I talked to had a different number, so it's like it was just
that's crazy.
A weird different time.
We appreciate you checking in with us from there. Have fun while you're there, and we'll hopefully talk soon. Thanks, Pete.
Sounds good, Dan. Thank you.
Appreciate the help as always. Pete Bercich, of course, part of the Paul Allen crew on game day Sundays, the radio analyst of the Vikings, long-standing KFAN contributor as well to many, many different programs. We always enjoy catching up with him at this time of year. If you'd like to react to our discussion, you know how to get a hold of us. The Bradshaw and Bryan KFAN text line is open. That is 64686. Back in a minute. Some interesting texts have come in responding to our discussion with Pete Bercich, who's in Indianapolis for the Combine, along with PA, I assume. Don't forget, in addition to Bercich joining us at 3:30, Luigi, Tuesday regular, is scheduled for 4:30 today. And Michael Grady is going to rejoin the program for the first time in a while at 5:30 to react to the rather improbable, dramatic come-from-behind victory for your Wolves, which we discussed at the top of the program. I think we go next to Los Angeles, don't we?
They're already there. They're doing the media tour.
That's right.
Finchie was on with Colin Cowherd. Zah was on ESPN. So they play the Lakers Thursday night, I believe.
You are correct as they continue this road trip. Meanwhile, your Wild, well, I'm sure we'll get to this with Louie, but your Wild are back in action tonight, right here on the Fan. And we got another injury. It is almost becoming...
in practice.
That's exactly it. You can't even blame this on another team cheap-shotting. This is your guy, Joel Eriksson-Ek, who gets hurt, as you say, in practice and has already, I believe, been placed on injured reserve. They're calling it a lower body injury. He is listed as week to week. We already know that Kaprizov is out and will be out for an extended period beyond the original time frame that the Wild had hoped that he might adhere to. And now you got Eriksson Ek out, right?
Yeah.
And it doesn't feel like he's going to be back, when you say day to day or week to week, it sounds like it's going to be a while with him too.
Week to week's a problem, given that it's February 25th.
So at some point, you just sort of shake your head and you go, well, I mean, what's even fair to expect of this team? You always want to hold your teams to a standard, right? About, okay, you still got work to do. You got to keep playing. Injuries are part of the game, blah, blah, blah. But if you keep losing your best players as often as the Wild seem to, then I just don't know why anybody thinks it's logical to expect that they're going to be able to stay afloat, right? When I say stay afloat, it's going to be very difficult to miss the playoffs at this point. That's been the beauty of the good first half of the season. But we're back to, what chances do we have to once the playoffs begin, really go somewhere, right? Maybe surprise people and win a series. Dare we say it, win a series, perhaps even win two? So the whole
point of this little stretch was get Kaprizov back at some point, get healthy, get healthier, and start building your game for the postseason. That was supposed to be the whole exercise here for the final.
We have 25 games left.
Yeah, a month and change of the season.
Yeah.
That was the idea, and so you'd rather not lose more guys as you're trying to get guys like Kaprizov back. And this one, as you say, does not sound very promising. When you start out week to week, that's plural. I mean, that's not we're going to check in on them next Tuesday and see how things are going. I'd be surprised if that were the case. So you got to figure it's going to be a long-term.
But how do we have this many? Do we have this many injury-prone players? Are we that unlucky? I mean, how does one explain?
Hockey's a funny game.
I guess it must be. We are in third in the Central right now. We're 4 points behind Dallas, 4 points ahead of the Lanch, with the proverbial 2 games in hand.
It's that time of year.
On the Avs. And I believe our cushion right now in terms of the playoffs is we're 10 points ahead of ninth place Calgary.
Right.
Which has played one fewer game than Minnesota. You mentioned the update on Hartman's suspension went down. Was it 2 games?
Yes.
But he's got another 4 to go, right? So that's still a ways off. And again, no end in sight on Kaprizov as well. So I'm sure we'll get to all of this with Louis in a little bit more detail. But it's difficult to see how you just sort of cobble the thing together and give yourself much of a chance to make this more than. I mean, it's feeling more and more like a lost season again, isn't it? After a really good, like I said, first half to the regular season. Especially because I think the more it all of it feels ominous, largely because of Kaprizov, right? This sense that, well, it's hard not to project the worst, which is maybe he's just not going to come back at all this year. Now, maybe part of the Guerin method is I'm going to lower expectations to such a degree that people are going to be gobsmacked when he comes back with 5 games to go in the regular season. Something like that. So I wanted to put it in people's heads that there's a good chance he might not play for an extended period or might not play at all. And then it's all, if deep down you think there is a chance he's going to play, then it's nothing. It almost feels like nothing but gravy that you get him at all. Correct? That's the way the master psychologist he is. That's the way he's thinking. I don't know.
Does he play chess like that?
I'm not sure if he does. Well,
historically,
I think he wanted. I do think he wanted to make a point of saying he was going to be out longer.
Yeah.
So I think that was calculated. Doesn't necessarily mean it was not. He was making it up. But I sensed he's been wanting to plant that for a while to lower the expectation. But we're back to I think at this point has to be smart enough to know that you don't want to bring Kaprizov back at 50% where you just say, well, just try to muck through it. On the front end, they tried to do this to a certain extent, right? And it wasn't very successful. So after all this time, he's too valuable beyond this season, right? He is the prized commodity.
He is. In
your franchise. And so that's to that extent, you don't want to mess with any of that. But I understand there's a lot of injuries in hockey. I don't think we seem to get more than most. And like you said, when they even happen in practice.
Right.
I didn't even know anybody. Does anybody in the NBA practice anymore, by the way? Are there practices anymore?
The allegation from the old heads is that they don't practice very often, and that's why they have so many injuries or need load management, because they're not hard and tough. Their bodies aren't used to going that hard. They do practices, I think, between off days and things like that. Like, I'm sure the Wolves...
They're just walkthroughs, maybe. I don't
definitely
even know if
during
practices.
But when they have a little bit of a stretch, I know they like to get a little bit of a run in. But no, it's mostly about trying to keep guys fresh, I think. Hockey, though, I think does go a little bit harder. But you do wonder, and you go, and as Hines described it, he just didn't feel good after practice. Something didn't feel right.
Yeah,
that was it. So they're not, at the time, they weren't even really sure exactly what the bit was with the injury.
Yeah, we can't blame this on some cheap shot artist from another team.
No,
it doesn't appear.
Exactly.
I just feel like we've got some. I'm not saying we're soft. I'm just saying we seem to have a high number of skilled players who are constantly battling this, and I don't know what you do about it, but it's not helpful by any stretch.
The Twins fired their trtraining staff a couple years ago.
Maybe that's the next step.
But
I don't know.
It didn't really help, though, because guys kept getting hurt.
Louis, like I said, we'll get in all this with him, among other things, at 4:30. I actually have another hockey item I want to run by you that we may or may not also get to with Louis, but it's worth a little bit of time. And then we'll get to some texts regarding to the Wolves comeback and also our football conversation with Peter Bercich. That all coming up as we begin the second hour of the program.